Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating chapter that is literally going to transform how you view something we interact with every single day, the market. We usually think of the market just in terms of numbers, graphs, profit margins, that kind of thing. But today, we're exploring it through a completely different lens.
All right, let's dive right in by asking a foundational question. What exactly is a market? When you hear that word, you probably picture a physical place, right? Like the fruit market down the street, or maybe a bustling wholesale district. Or, maybe you think of a business category like the smartphone market or the job market for computer professionals. But what if we zoom out for a second? What if the market isn't just this cold economic machine, but an actual living, breathing social institution?
To get us in the right mindset for this chapter, think about this. There are things you pay for today that your grandparents would have literally laughed you out of the room for buying. Take bottled water, for instance. Your grandparents would have thought you were absolutely crazy for buying water in a plastic bottle. Yet today, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. This brilliantly illustrates how our understanding of what can be bought and sold is constantly shifting. And you know what? That shift is entirely driven by society.
So, here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We'll be covering 1. The market beyond economics, 2. Tribal markets as social hubs, 3. Caste, trust, and trade, 4. Colonialism and new markets, 5. Capitalism and commoditization, and finally, 6. Globalization's interconnected markets. Okay, let's get into it.
Starting with Section 1, the market beyond economics. Let's look at how different academic disciplines actually view the exchange of goods and services.
Consider the foundational figure of Adam Smith. He's the 18th century thinker who essentially gave birth to modern economics. In his incredibly famous book, The Wealth of Nations, Smith argued that the market is made up of countless individual, self-interested exchanges. And kind of magically, even though no one explicitly intends to do it, these millions of selfish transactions automatically create a functioning, ordered economic system.
So the crucial point to grab hold of here is the contrast. Following Smith, modern economics really tends to view the economy as this totally separate system governed by its own mathematical laws, supply, demand, price. But sociology, it looks at it completely differently. Sociologists argued that economies absolutely do not exist in a vacuum. Instead, they are socially embedded. They're constructed in culturally specific ways. They're controlled by particular social groups, and they're deeply, deeply connected to institutions like family and caste.
Moving on to Section 2. Tribal markets as social hubs. Let's step away from the abstract theories for a moment and look at a real-world example of a weekly tribal market.
Anthropologist Alfred Gell observed a seriously fascinating phenomenon in Dori village, that's in the Bastard district of Chhattisgarh, an area heavily populated by the Gond Adivasi group. Now, 6 days a week, Dori is this sleepy, almost non-existent hamlet. But on Friday, market day, it completely transforms. As Gell observed in a very vivid quote, the whole world seems to arrive. It just becomes this rich, confusing, magnificent center of life.
And this perfectly illustrates the core argument of this chapter. The weekly hot is not just an economic center. I mean, yes, tribal locals bring forest produce like tamarind to sell to Hindu traders, and they buy manufactured goods like salts or trinkets. But the primary reason a lot of people actually attend is highly social. They come to arrange marriages, exchange village gossip, catch up with extended kin, and even conduct religious ceremonies. The economy there is entirely embedded right within their social lives.
All right, Section 3, caste, trust, and trade. Let's see how this social embeddedness builds into the highly sophisticated traditional trading networks of pre-colonial India.
There's a huge misconception that pre-colonial India was just a bunch of isolated, self-sufficient villages. But in reality, it featured these massive, incredibly sophisticated trading networks. Take the Nakaratars of Tamil Nadu, for example. They engaged in extensive banking and long-distance trade. But here's the kicker. They didn't rely on some government-controlled central bank. Instead, their financial system relied heavily on the hundi, basically a credit note. A merchant in one city could issue a hundi that another merchant far, far away would just honor. Why? Simply because of absolute trust. And that trust was strictly maintained through their shared caste, kinship, and marriage networks. Literally, the bank was the community.
That brings us to Section 4, colonialism and new markets. Now, of course, these deeply social, traditional markets weren't just static. They ended up facing massive disruption from outside forces.
The advent of colonialism produced some major economic upheavals. Before British rule, India was a total manufacturing powerhouse, famous all over the world for exporting luxury silks and handloom cotton. But colonialism flipped this dynamic entirely on its head. India was forced out of its manufacturing role. Its domestic industries were completely flooded with cheap English goods, and the whole nation was reorganized to basically just supply raw materials to fuel England's own industrialization.
Yet, as the chapter points out, social institutions are incredibly resilient. Even within all this massive disruption, new business communities adapted to the changing tides. The Marwaris are a perfect example of this. They really took advantage of new opportunities in colonial cities like Calcutta, leveraging those tight-knit community networks to spread throughout the entire country. They evolved from regional traders to ubiquitous bazaar shopkeepers, and eventually into some of India's most powerful modern industrial families.
Now for Section 5, Capitalism and Commoditization. Let's bring these historical shifts into a modern theoretical framework, focusing on the defining economic system of our time, capitalism.
To really understand capitalism as a social system, we have to look to Karl Marx. Marx argued that the economy isn't actually made of things, it's made of relationships between people. Under capitalism, you have two main classes. You've got the capitalists, who own the means of production, like the factories. And then you have the workers, who don't own these means, so they're forced to sell the only thing they actually have, their labor power. Marx pointed out that the capitalist essentially profits by paying the worker less than the actual value of what they produce, thereby extracting what he called surplus value.
Now, a key pillar of this capitalist system is a concept called commoditization or commodification. Basically, this is the process where something that previously existed entirely outside the market, maybe something managed by nature, the community, or the family, is suddenly assigned a price tag. It gets turned into a product that can be bought and sold.
Okay, let's make this real with some examples of how commoditization impacts your everyday life. Remember our bottled water example from the very beginning? Well, that's the commoditization of nature, but it goes way further. Traditionally, marriages were arranged organically by extended families. Today, you've got professional marriage bureaus and matchmaking websites charging a premium fee for that exact service. Even social etiquette, which used to just be taught at home, is now literally sold in spoken English and personality development classes. The market's reach is constantly expanding. Sometimes it gets highly controversial too, like the debates around the illegal sale of human organs, like kidneys.
And sociologists like Max Weber added another super fascinating layer to all this consumption. Weber actually coined the term status symbol. He pointed out that the goods we buy in these markets don't just serve a practical, everyday function, they signal our lifestyle. Think about the specific brand of cell phone you use right now, or the car you drive. These act as clear markers of your socioeconomic status to the rest of society. In a very real way, we buy commodities to define exactly who we are.
Finally, Section 6, Globalization's Interconnected Markets. We've looked at local, tribal markets, and national trading networks. But how do these socially embedded markets operate on a planetary scale today?
Well, in India, a major shift happened in the late 1980s, with economic liberalization really ushering in the era of globalization. Today, markets are completely 100% interconnected internationally. Money, commodities, information, and people, they all move incredibly rapidly across borders. This means a local market is simply no longer isolated. As the chapter highlights, a sudden slump in the tech sector over in the United States can instantly threaten software jobs in cities all across India. Our social and economic networks, they are completely global now.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on the chapter, we've really seen how the market is so much more than just a place to trade, right? It's a deeply social institution, woven into our tribes, our castes, our colonial histories, and our global identities. I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to consider in your own life. As the logic of the market continues to expand its reach deeper and deeper into society, what previously untouched, sacred, or totally free part of human existence do you think will be bought and sold next? Really think about it. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring.